Hi, I'm Catherine Matthews and I'm an artist and art teacher, and I've been asked to do a session for you all which is an art activity for your Wellbeing Week. I've been an art teacher a really long time and I hope you're going to enjoy this. So I'm going to say goodbye at this point because it'll be my hands doing all the work and you'll see my desk in front of me, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello. So the aim of today's session is to produce a mindful drawing, or a set of tools that will allow you to do your own mindful drawing in your own time. Hopefully this isn't just a one-off. It's inspired by a method known as Zentangle, which was invented by an American artist called Maria Thomas and a monk called Rick Roberts. And the aim is to produce a small abstract pattern study that will entirely take up your focus and allow you to express yourself freely. I've adapted it a little, and we're taking it a step further by producing, rather than an abstract, we're going to work on a landscape drawing. I find that I quite like a structure to work on, so thinking about shapes that you can then fill with pattern. It's a little more confidence building when you're starting off, so I'm going to talk you through that process. But the aim is to be, rather than the mindless doodling that you do when you're concentrating on something else, is to be actually quite mindful in that you're making creative decisions at every turn. So we'll start with the structure of the landscape, then we'll think about areas that we can add additional shapes to, and then we'll start to think about pattern that we can add to that. The advantage of all this creative decision making is it's using a different part of your brain to what you often do, and it's going to be quite absorbing. Hopefully you'll really enjoy it, but it doesn't have to be something you're very precious about. You may just treat it as an exercise, or you may find that you actually really like what you do. We'll add some colour to the work, whether you do watercolour paint, depends what you've got to hand, or you can keep it quite loose and simple if you wish, so taking a bit less time over it, just keeping your patterns a little simpler, or you can take hours and hours over it. But I'll walk you through the process. I'll explain how we can start off, and hopefully you'll really enjoy it. Okay, so the first thing you'll need is a piece of paper, and it can be any paper you've got. Printer paper will be fine, or plain paper, or even lined, and you'll need a pen. A pen is good for this because if you overthink things and get too precious about it, it takes some of the creative decision making out of it. So your best bet is to make a line and then see what it turns into, which is very Zentangle in its approach. So when we start off with any kind of landscape, it's a good idea to start with horizon line. So horizon line is where the land meets the sky, and you can add mountains in here, or you could have it as quite a flat landscape. Depends on what sort of landscape makes you happy. I'm going to go for a slightly mountainous landscape, hilly, and then maybe take it up there as well. And so to start with, you've got a good solid line that starts to form the structure of the landscape. I'm going to add in some lower ground, and that's done with another line. I'm also going to add in a river, if my pen will work, which it hasn't entirely. That sort of thing happens. Just retrace your line, and then I might swap my pen actually, and then another line. Now if you're looking to create depth and distance in your landscape, you want to get these lines to converge, to go towards each other as you go up the page, and that gives a sense of perspective, like 1 point perspective. It's not compulsory, but it really does make a landscape look quite landscapey. From here you can add some other shapes, some other structure. It's quite nice to have some trees in the distance and then maybe some trees closer up, or you could have some rocks and boulders. I'm a particularly big fan of boulders, so I'm going to add in some rocks, and again start bigger in the foreground, going smaller further away, and that helps to add distance into your landscape. You can add some of these in the water if you want to. This isn't a right or wrong way of working, it's just using some tools that will help your work to look like a landscape. What else? We can add some more lines showing sort of undulations of the landscape. And what that's left us with is a framework that we can then build our pattern into. So the idea with Zentangle is that you look at these sort of shapes and marks. You can make geometric shapes or natural forms, and you're effectively just deciding what sort of pattern to include in each of these shapes. If you're not feeling very confident, I suggest you start with one of the smaller shapes first, but if you're worried your pen might run, which I think mine might in places, then I would always recommend that you start sort of further away from, I'm right-handed, so I'm starting in the left-hand corner, in order to not smudge my work too much. I'm going to look at this shape here initially, which is one of my hills, and I'm going to break that into slightly smaller shapes just by adding additional lines into it. I'm going to do the same over here. And then I can begin to build up some pattern within this. Now in a natural landscape I'm not a huge fan of geometry, but actually it can look quite nice with sort of tile patterns and things. Thinking about what sort of patterns make you happy, you could have little bumpy patterns like this. Looks a little bit like scales. And the process of repeating the same mark or shape is what creates the pattern. And at each section I've got to make a decision about what pattern to use. You can make your patterns quite elaborate, and you can add additional details to them. If you want an extra sort of outline around things, you can run a parallel line, and the concentration of this is what helps it to be quite a soothing, calming thing to do. Remember, you can move your paper around. I'm trying to keep mine in shot so that you can see what I'm doing, but you can move your paper around to reach different bits of your drawing quite easily. I'm going to add some stripes in my next one, just in one direction I think, keeping those lines quite parallel. and by using a different pattern in each of the shapes helps it to look really deliberate. So whilst it's really important that you're doing patterns that make you happy, it's also quite nice to make ones that look like you did it on purpose. Pens aren't behaving particularly well today. I'll turn it around so I can do this bit. For the next section I'm going to do some circles. I would like to do concentric circles. Some of them I'll do as doubles and some as triples. But I'll keep the triples for bigger spaces. And I might do some more of that pattern over here too. I think I'll do more of the scales over this side. This one also needs that double line. I think it'll annoy me if it doesn't have one. So what else? So some of the patterns that you make might look like flowers or plants. Some maybe start with spirals, or have a central bit that things come out from, like a cycle spokes. Some of them are semicircles like this, and then that can build up. Remember, it's that repeat that makes it a pattern. It's not a picture of something. It's a deliberate repeated shape. I think this needs a little more, so I'll go for dot and some spokes. I think I might shade in this bit so that it's a solid black. Like that, and then maybe some repeated shapes heading outwards here. So some dots in a row. I think I'll add some lines in there. Gives it a sense of movement. And then what in the next one? Maybe a checkered pattern. And with these squares you can include areas of detail. Patterns are generally quite organised things. There's a rhythm to them, which I think is what makes them soothing. And then we go on. I do tend to quite like circular patterns. And I'll do this one with zigzags. I'm pairing my zigzags up. And I'm going to do quite a tight checkered pattern on this one. If you make an error like this little bit here, it's got a bit sticking out of it, you can always make that a feature. Double the line up. And colour it in. That keeps it looking quite neat and tidy. I'm going to do some spirals in this section here, I think. So let's start here. And just see where the lines take you. It can make your hand ache after a bit, this. like to do some squares. Again, leaving fairly even gaps between them, a bit like bricks. It's important when you do yours that you put patterns in that you like. They don't have to be the same as mine. They started off quite even, but not so much in the end. And on this one I'm going to do some little zigzaggy broken sort of shapes, again with gaps in between. A bit like bricks or tiles. And then some more circles, I think. And so we continue looking for shapes, adding pattern until all the areas you want to have filled up are filled up. And you can add darker lines to some of these if you want to, and extend and develop some of them. Some of them you can keep really, really simple, like stripes and crisscrossing in different directions. You can do wavy lines in the river. And then in each of these spaces you can add curves to add to the waves, and a few more spirals to suggest movement. Sometimes the patterns can get closer together the further into the distance it goes. That actually really adds to that sense of depth and distance in a landscape. alternating patterns can be quite fun too. So here I've got the spirals alternating with more wavy lines. Again, getting smaller into the distance to add to that sense of depth. I'm going to leave a couple of areas a bit plainer, so there's areas to colour that are a bit more contrasting to the pattern. And then I'm going to add some trees into the distance. I'm just going to keep them relatively simple, like little triangle lollipops. In different sizes. And some overlapping, and within those you can get more pattern and detail. You can thicken up some of the lines if you want to, which gives you a bit more emphasis in some places than others. You can do that with a pen, or if you've got a marker pen, you just go over some of your lines around each section of pattern just with a marker pen, and that can be quite nice too. And then the whole thing can have colour. So if you have colours available, you can use coloured pencils for this, or you could use watercolours. And to show you, I'll use coloured pencils, but watercolours are quite nice as well, and you don't have to stay within the lines either. So it's not something that you need to worry too much if you've not had a lot of painting practice. It's just quite nice to slosh some colour about. There's how you thicken up some of the lines. Thicken up some of these lines around the boulders as well. This one here, I'd quite like to stand out a bit. Looks a bit like an Easter egg. This one in the river needs a little bit more definition. I'm quite happy with my swirls though, they look quite rivery. So it's important to remember the landscape doesn't have to be this shape. If you want a flatter landscape or a woodlandy landscape, you know, there's lots of different things work. This horizon line can be any shape you like. So you can try this with lots of different ways. You could do a sort of patchwork landscape of fields where you've got different pattern in each patch that's a field. That can work beautifully. So they don't all need to be the same at all. So when you're happy that you've defined some areas as well, then we can start thinking about adding some colour. Coloured pencils are great for this because they are quite pointy, so they will go in the different gaps and you've got a sense of control. If you've got coloured fine liners, they work great as well. And really it's just working with your favourite colours, but again, choosing your colours is quite a mindful thing to do. That process of selection is actually pretty useful for exercising that bit of your brain that makes the creative decisions, so it can feel restful from some of the other stuff that you do. And I'm going to work with some of my favourite colours to show you what I mean. So I think I might do this area here green, but this area here I would like it to be a yellow ochre. I'm going to leave the sky white for now, but obviously you can add things to the sky. You could add clouds with different shapes, you can add sun. Sunset might be nice. We'll see what time I've got and maybe add that in. We can add in you know, rain clouds and raindrops and all sorts of things like that. I quite like some areas of block colour, but that's not a particularly Zentangle thing, that's just a personal preference. Like I said, this isn't a Zentangle, it's an interpretation of and inspired by. So you take the bits that you're interested in from it and adapt it and make it your own. So I'm going to go for some stronger green a little bit further back. really this can be any colour that you want, so it doesn't have to be realistic landscape colours. You could do the whole thing in different shades of pink if you wanted to. Choosing your favourite colours and making, again, that creative decision is all part of this. Quite like that little layer of white on there. I might change my mind yet. Let's have some yellow. And the colour is optional. These are perfectly lovely, just without any colour. So, so just, you know, it's up to you if you're short on time, or if you're not that bothered about the colour, don't do it. Have a little bit of blue in the water. Again, it doesn't have to be the colours you'd expect. Being a landscape, it gives you some answers, so you don't have to go with it though. You can really use whatever colours that you want to. It's a bit like toothpaste running up the middle of this now. And people often use colouring for therapy as a way of passing the time in a creative way. So this bit should actually be very soothing. I missed a bit here with my pen. Continue that line along. There we go. I'm sorry about the strange noises. I have a tree above my studio that sort of waves its branches on the tin roof, and it makes a very peculiar noise, so apologies for that. A darker blue here. A little bit of purple in here, not loads, just a little. Remember, you can always leave some shapes plain. It means the lines are a little clearer if you do. And obviously, having put all the lines in there, it's quite nice to keep them. You can fade out colours. So I'm starting the centre of these spirals quite orange and then fading out into some of the yellow colours by taking the pressure off the pencil as I move it round, pressing a bit harder in the centre. And this is the sort of thing you can do if you're going to watercolour it. Don't worry about staying within the lines, but use the lines as a guide to help you make decisions about what colour goes where. Like this one here. I haven't attempted to stay in the lines, just use them as a bit of a guide. And this is easier if you're a bit short on time. I'm speeding up slightly because I'm aware of the time. But it still works, even if it's not as neat and precise as some of the other bits, because the lines do all the work and you've already put the time into those. Oh, I've missed another one. Going to have little dark green trees up there. It's a good idea to keep your pencils reasonably sharp if you're using pencils, though you won't have the same issue obviously if you're using pens. It helps you keep track of staying in the lines, if that's what you're doing. The pointier your tool is, the the more direct you can be. And occasionally it helps to turn it upside down too. Okay, so I think there we have it. It's possible to do this in lots of different ways, and this was one I watercoloured earlier. But you can see you get a much softer approach with it. I've been fairly direct with this one. This one is slightly easier with coloured pencils to get the colour to go where you want it to, but it works very nicely with loose colour as well. Hopefully you've all enjoyed that. If you're following along, fantastic. If you're planning to do this at some point later, just remember that a structure and some good shapes will make it much easier to know where to put your different patterns, and to trust your own creative judgment. If you don't want to put a pattern somewhere, don't. It's your artwork, so take ownership of it and don't worry too much if it's not how you originally set out, but go with the flow and allow the pen to do the work for you. I really hope you've enjoyed this anyway, and I want to say thank you for having me do the lesson, and also thank you for all that you do. Take care. Bye.